Welcome. My name is Amrik. I'm the Director of Customer Success at Dability, the makers of SurveyCTO. And I'm here today to talk to you about adapting to computer-assisted telephone interviewing, or CATI, as an approach to continuing your data collection amidst our current health crisis. My team at Dability have been working on resources to complement new features, which together can help users adapt to CATI. You'll find most of this advice in the CATI starter kit we've prepared, which is available on the support center. So, just to foreground what we are going to cover, here is our overview. First, we're going to look at why you would choose CATI as an alternative to face-to-face interviewing. Then we'll look at requirements and recommendations on what to prepare for CATI. We'll discuss how to execute CATI using SurveyCTO, covering the challenges the system needs to solve to help you to do what you need. We'll showcase software improvements that have just been released that can help you improve CATI for SurveyCTO users. And lastly, I'll do a brief demonstration of our advanced CATI sample workflow. So first off, why choose CATI? Well, there have been several immediate responses overall to COVID-19 amongst researchers doing data collection. Many have simply canceled field work, suspending field operations for the foreseeable future. Others are considering face-to-face or alternatives to face-to-face interviewing, like CATI. CATI is one of a few alternative data collection solutions, including web forms, SMS, and interactive voice recognition surveys. Specifically, we'll be exploring self-managed CATI as an option. So, in exploring CATI, I'd like to make the case for it over these other alternatives. Face-to-face interviews have been a first choice for a good reason, and that has partly to do with the value of interviewer-mediated research as opposed to self-enumeration. Often in survey research, we're concerned on some level about enumerator bias and the effects enumerators have on data. But what about the alternative, where there is no interviewer? Can you say that respondents read the questions carefully and understood them? That they have considered each possible response option? While there are ways of assessing data quality with self-enumeration data collection methods, it is also a dramatic departure from the research that is otherwise supported by trained interviewers. Trained interviewers can just as often be an ally in the name of good quality data by carefully explaining questions and generally acting as the driving force that gets respondents from the first through to the last question in your questionnaire. For these reasons and others, CATI will be the best choice for many projects. Otherwise, there's a case for making use of the resources that you have. If you already have trained interview staff and mobile devices that have been used for data collection in the past, it makes sense to take advantage of those resources when adapting to CATI, and that's been one of our approaches. Lastly on this subject, while I feel that there's a strong case for CATI, try not to dismiss other approaches and tools. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. It is possible to combine strategies and for them to work to complement one another. But again, we're going to focus on CATI in this webinar. So preparing for CATI. Running your own CATI surveys does have some prerequisites, but these are achievable. Staff working at home will need some equipment, but projects can adapt with a mix of personal and organization-issued hardware, including tablets, smartphones, and laptops. Phone interviewers will need at least one device that they can make calls from, which could be a smartphone, a feature phone, or they could use services like Skype. Some projects today will integrate with cloud telephony services like the Exotel system in India, which offers many benefits like centralized billing, call recording, and in addition, these systems take care of all of the call connections, which is convenient. We also strongly advise that staff use earphones with an inline mic. It might sound like a basic thing, but use of headsets with a microphone will make it possible for a single device to be used for calls and data capture, as well as providing a greater level of privacy for the respondent. Increased sound quality from headsets also means clearer, less frustrating interviews and cleaner recordings for projects that are doing call auditing. SIM cards will also be important and could be the source of your team's internet service. So while phone interviews can take place without moment-to-moment access to the internet on mobile devices, laptops running web forms will need connections, and if your projects are using VoIP services like Skype, obviously you will need a good internet connection. You might also think about incentive systems that distribute mobile credit or mobile money to be sent to respondents of your survey. Bulk SMS services can also be helpful for promoting responses through providing advanced notice of interviews to take place, and also for boosting retention across survey rounds where you happen to need to divide calls over, or surveys over several calls. Phone surveys are also different from face-to-face surveys in a few ways. So your instruments will need to be adapted to some degree. Firstly, successful phone surveys have questionnaires that are much shorter than face-to-face interviews. Some of the sources I've consulted suggest that 5 to 10 minutes is probably the longest viable duration. So in other words, the shorter the better. Perhaps you might stretch the length a little, depending on how invested respondents are in outcomes and what sort of incentives you're able to offer. Many factors stand in the way of lengthy phone surveys, including the fact that phone surveys are just generally less clear, and people find talking on the phone more tiring than in-person conversations. People are also generally more hospitable in person, I would argue. So keeping things short on the phone is just generally a good idea. Another key challenge is that phone conversations can be interrupted at any time for several reasons. Your instrument will need to be designed in such a way to tolerate interruptions, allowing for resuming after redialing if you're disconnected, or accepting the answers that you have so far if the respondent cannot be contacted again. In fact, one of the links I shared earlier in the chat provides advice on these types of solving these types of form design requirements. So do have a look at that. We can generally give the following advice or specific points about adapting your instruments. So the one point is about the order of your form. Order your questions from the most to least important, because that way you'll get the answers that matter most, if nothing else. Divide your data collection into call-sized chunks if you can't eliminate that many questions, and then plan your data collection across maybe 2 or 3 calls and that sort of scenario. Try to improve response rates through incentives and through reminding respondents about callbacks that might be necessary as part of your project. But generally, the more questions you can cut, that you can decide are not that important, the better. Training will also be difficult and new at this time, as several things you might have done in the past won't be possible now. You can't fly team members to another country for training. You can't ask enumerators to congregate in one place for training. Because you can't travel easily, you can't bring hardware for interviews, such as mobile devices, easily. It can also be a challenge to distribute phones and tablets to enumerators, particularly during lockdowns. Although a responsible plan to distribute hardware might be made, depending on the country context. So there are definitely other things to think about as well, but we have a few points of advice about coping with training. Traditional training materials, like slide decks, like the one I'm using now to talk with you, can still be useful. So you may consider developing slide decks still, but just think about how they will look on small screens. You may want to include less rather than more information and make the text a bit bigger. Doing a narrated screen recording of your slide presentation could also be a good way to communicate what's important to understand. Projects that have technical or difficult to understand concepts might benefit from producing videos that try to illustrate and explain those concepts. You can also develop SurveyCTO forms for the purpose of training. Almost like slideshows, building the content of the presentation into the form design itself. So screens or fields inside the form could act as the slides displaying information, images, and playable media. You can also develop comprehension tests or quizzes to assess the understanding of training material. These could also be SurveyCTO forms that are designed to grade the answers. Phone interviews could be new to many of your team members, and practice with any new system will be important to help team members understand. Mock interviews as part of training are generally important, and digital data collection presents the opportunity to grade practice interviews. If you happen to script what the answers are for the respondent as part of practice interviews, this would allow you to compare the submitted answers to a set of correct answers, which could be a useful method for determining whether your team members are understanding the process and are able to record the answers correctly. So what does a CATI system look like? Well, we've built an example system which achieves several things and solves several problems that we feel that were important. So beyond the recording of answers to explicit research questions, which are part of your work, a CATI system, well, the CATI system that we propose is one that logs each contact attempt in a form submission, regardless of the result. So typically in a CATI survey, you'll probably budget for X number of contact attempts to reach each respondent. When each call attempt is logged in a form submission, you can track the number of contact attempts that were made overall. Calls can have all sorts of results: wrong numbers, bad numbers that won't connect, respondents who turn out not to be available, also hitting voicemail inboxes. Ideally, you want to track all of this information. Beyond the calls themselves, There are also some generic aspects of CATI systems that aren't particular to your project. All projects should have a consent statement or step in the form. All surveys should instruct phone interviews to confirm that they're speaking to the right person. If the right person isn't available, you'll need to be able to make some sort of plan to call back, perhaps an appointment to speak with that person at a better time. All of these actions and events can be built into a CATI system, and the SurveyCTO team have developed a starter kit for CATI interviewing, including a sample form and phone dialer field plugin that allows you to launch phone calls directly from a SurveyCTO form. So we're going to have a look at this soon, but I would just like to discuss a few software improvements which will be interesting. So just this week, we have released a software update for SurveyCTO Collect for Android, which dramatically improves CATI. This version is an early release, not yet available via the Google Play Store. So you'll have to install version 2.70.1 and future early releases from the product documentation. We also have a guide to early releases on the support center, which will answer any common questions you might have about early releases. The following improvements are noteworthy. So SurveyCTO's audio audit feature can now record phone calls, but this is unfortunately limited to Android 4.4 through 7. There is some support for call recording on Android 8, but we are facing limitations because Google, the developers of the Android operating system, are tightening up security. They are disallowing the recording of calls in later versions or more recent versions of Android, which limits this as a potential solution for our requirements for phone interviewing. But nevertheless, for those who are using slightly older versions of Android, you will also benefit from audio sensor stream statistics about calls. For those of you who are using later versions of Android, such as version 8, 9, and later, the best way forward, if you are invested in CATI as a concept, is to look into a field plugin-based integration with a cloud telephony solution. Earlier, I had mentioned that some of our users working in India integrate with a system called Exotel. Because Exotel both initiates each side of the call and connects the two, they're able to record both sides of the call and provide you with a call recording which you can review on the Exotel side. But there are many of these digital phone systems. It's just about finding one that works for the country or region that you happen to work in. We're very happy to discuss that further with those who are interested. Another exciting update, which improves things a lot for CATI, is the fact that case management systems or generally workflows that depend on server datasets update automatically now. Previously, the local copies of cases datasets would need to be installed manually. But now with the new settings that we've added and the dataset updates that we have added, cases datasets and regular server datasets will be installed automatically after being downloaded automatically. So this is a general improvement for everybody depending on server datasets. Just to highlight, if you'll watch my mouse cursor, the two new settings which you can find under general settings are auto download on demand and auto install downloaded update. I'll demonstrate the effects of these in a moment. Well, not the last improvement. The last one I'll just discuss here for now is that a full phone call log can be made available as part of the form data through using a new phone call log function, which you can just add into your form designs. Okay, so let us demo the cases dataset. But just before we do, I'm going to show you one or two things in the browser. So first of all, if you are interested in trying out the early releases, if you do travel to our docs page, if you, under the data collection tab, under using the SurveyCTO Collect app, there's a link to follow for downloading and installing. Under the official releases, you'll see the early release, and you can click and download that from here. On our support center, if you are interested in learning more about running CATI surveys using SurveyCTO, under our guides, you'll find the computer-assisted telephone interviewing starter kit. We document everything here, and our samples have direct links from section 4. So you don't have to read everything to get started. You can jump in straight away. Also, we also recommend that you have a look at the guide and reference material about early releases. So take a look under reference material. Here you will learn a little bit more about early releases, what they are, the full list of features and summary, how to install them, all the questions that you might have to ask about early releases. So do take a look at that. So just to explain what I've done so far, I have downloaded the sample form, the server dataset definition, and the sample data provided in the advanced CATI sample workflow. I deployed the form, I uploaded the cases definition, and uploaded some data. So this is the sample case data. So don't worry about not having seen these steps in detail. All of the small but easy to complete steps are part of the guide. Let's take a look at this on Android. Now, please just confirm if you can't see what's on my screen now. I purposefully shared the whole screen earlier so that you would see this Android screen share as well. So for now, I'm going to be discussing this Android screen share overlay. So do let me know if you don't see this Android device. All right, so first, just some questions, so some setup steps. You can get access to all of the settings on the device from the three-dot icon on the top right. Under admin settings, you do need to enable case management at the top, or else you won't see that menu. The other settings that I discussed under general settings, you'll find them here under the topmost auto send and receive part of the menu. But let's run through an example. So I'm going to tap on case management. Okay, so the first thing I'll draw your attention to is a update in the early release. You can see above the case table, last updated. We can see that today's date, this is my local time, down to the minute. So what happened here is that the cases list automatically updated without me needing to do anything. I didn't need to click on or tap on the refresh button. This just happened automatically. So your caseworkers or phone interviewers will know whether their cases list is up to date. The table is scrollable, and you can include several columns of information. In this example, I haven't started doing any interviews. I have no history with any of the cases that are assigned to me, so I will just pick any one. So I will pick the first case. Oop. Actually, there is a history. Apologies, I did not clean up from last time. So let's choose the second case. I'll explain a bit more. So all right, so here's the case that we want to advance to. Ideally, it should have a better label than case 102, but that's something you can change yourself. So there's only one form associated with this case. So I'm going to tap on that and open it. Another recent update with early release is this notice. We can see that attached files for this form were downloaded and installed at this time and date. And this is my local time and date down to the minute. This happened in a brief pause inside, when I tapped to open the form. If you're on a very slow or poor connection, there might be a little bit of a delay before this happens. But you could always cancel if you're not able to connect and complete that process. I'm not going to read through the labels and steps in the form in a lot of detail, simply because you can test this yourself. A lot of these details are quite simple and common sense, but suffice to say this intro screen is just about the color coding scheme that we used as an example in this form. So this is a training screen. You may not want to include this. This explains that in the system that we are proposing, that every respondent can have as many as 5 different phone numbers, which you can try and contact them on. You can also collect phone numbers as part of the process of trying to contact respondents. You can also collect information about the phone numbers that you have, about who the owner of the phone number is, if the owner is different from the respondent. So all of that can be tracked inside our proposed system. So these are some guidelines about how to decide which number to call first. I don't have any information about these numbers yet, and I only have 2 numbers. So I'll just pick the first one. Okay, so this is call number 1. There was no previous call, so there is no previous status. And the field plugin for dialing phone numbers displays the following: the phone number, and here is the button to tap to dial the number. So if I tap on that button, what happens is the dialer application on my device is populated with the phone number. I could tap on the dial button now to connect. I won't do that now because this isn't a real phone number. But once you have dialed, you should just be able to press the back button to return to the form while the call continues. So at the bottom it says success. It just is recording the fact that the plugin was able to send the phone number. So if I were answering the call, I would, if I were the interviewer, I would start reading the script. Hi, this is Amrik calling for Andy, and so forth. So let's say that the call was answered, but not by the respondent, which is going to happen. I'll say that a family member happened to be answering. So now we need to fill in a family member name. So I'll just fill in something there. I'll indicate that Andy is actually not around at the moment. We can't speak with him right now. Okay, so in the course of the conversation, we're asking, could you share the best number to contact Andy on? Depending on the logic that you go through, you could record a new number. But in this case, I am going to indicate the second number as the best number to contact Andy on. Okay, so now I need to indicate the relationship between Andy and the owner of the phone number that was indicated as the best. So I'll say that the second number is Andy's. It's the respondent's number. So I'll just type Andy here as well. All right, so we're wrapping things up. At this point, we can say goodbye. Perhaps depending on the conversation, you might have learned when the next best time to speak to Andy was. So I'll choose a time and date to call back. I'll pick the 30th, maybe in the morning. Okay. And now this is just a confirmation step of the interview. You also have the option to use our SMS field plugin to send advanced warning of the call that might be coming. Maybe Andy will be more likely to answer if he gets an SMS from the person who will call him. So I'll say yes in this case. So the message could be concatenated from different details in the form. Just like with the phone dialer plugin, with the SMS plugin, you just tap on the button and the message field and the phone number field are populated. Obviously, I'm not going to send this message right now. Okay, so now I need to log the status of the call. In your version of things, you might calculate a result code. You might not want to, that's up to you. Here the result code is answered, but not by the respondent. That's the sort of summary. Okay, so we have another summary screen. This is just for testing. You don't need to include that. Now I'm going to save and exit the form. Okay, so now below the full blank forms, you can see the finalized forms. The string of text here is something that you can define using the instance name feature of the form. Here I've set it to the date and the last status of the call, so we can see what happened here. You will see these finalized record of forms in this list with the case, whether your device has been able to send data to the server or not. So this feature works offline. Anyway, I'll open the form one more time just to show you that a few things were updated. So I'm going to tap on the form. And again, at the top, you can see that the attached data was updated. Okay, so the form is going to recommend for the second call, see the call number is now 2, and the last call status is updated. It's going to recommend that I try the best number. So maybe I will tap on the button to call Andy. I'll tap on the back button. And perhaps I get through to him. The phone is answered by the correct respondent. So I ask him for his consent. Now I ask him if he has 10 minutes to respond to the survey. Obviously, the answer might be yes, but it's more interesting to see what the answer is when it's no. So when he indicates that it's no, I can now make an appointment time to speak with him. Maybe he can only speak to me on Saturday afternoon. So pick Saturday, pick a time. And my status this time is answered, but not complete. Oh, it is possible also in the sample to record a comment if you had one, but you don't need to do that. And now when I submit this, the cases list will advance to the third call. So when I take a look at Andy, we can see the last call status, and I can see the number of calls that have taken place so far. So that's a very brief demo of our CATI system.